September 28th, 2020. I got this all seeded yesterday, did a video on it. Just wanted to catch this roller mat in better daylight where you can actually see how well it matted down. Really came out pretty nice. I'm impressed. That works pretty well. And I also want to mention, I didn't mention this in the video before, but the roller doesn't have any water in it, so that's just an empty roller. There's not a lot of weight to it, is my point. There are some leaks in that roller. I probably could epoxy it, but I think rather than do that, if I wanted to add weight, I probably would just set up a bracket and add like cinder blocks or something like that I could add in increments and increase the weight. But so far it doesn't seem to really need that. It probably would press a little flatter if I did do that. But this is good enough for me, and I can always come back and do another roll later if I want. And I see a ton of smartweed in here. That sort of makes me want to come back and do a mow, but I really like that mat, so I think I'm going to leave it and let the rye come up, and hopefully the rye's allelopathic effect will knock the smartweed out. If not, we'll deal with it in the spring. We'll just, you know, mow short, till, cover crop, and plant. But I just want to show how this came out. Pretty impressive for a lawnmower and an empty roller. Alright, so today we have some new stuff on the planting list. We got heavy rains forecasted for tomorrow, 1.6 inches or something like that. And I guess I should mention last night we had 0.18 inches of rain according to the Elizaville gauge. So we did get some moisture on top of that. It's perfect timing for newly seeded cover crops. Very happy about that. I have not gotten back to do inoculants, and looking at this forecast coming up here with the heavy thunderstorms, rather than put on inoculants and nutritional supplements before really heavy rain, I don't want that to wash out. I'm going to wait until after the rain and do the inoculants then. So the inoculants can take, the soil will be nice and moist, but we won't end up possibly having runoff, because if we get a really heavy rain shower, it could wash some of it out. And I want to make sure that the nutrient that I put down stays in place. Alright. Oh man, these sunflowers are awesome. I'm definitely planting way more of those next year. So this is all looking pretty good. You can see a little bit of moisture in there. I noticed yesterday when I looked closer at this block, I could see a lot of buckwheat seed all through here, even on top. And of course that means there's a bunch mixed in as well. I'm thinking if the weather holds, this might sprout into buckwheat, and then the Austrian winter pea and the rye will come up through that. That would be kind of a cool way to establish the cover crop, provided the weather stays warm enough. Certainly should have enough moisture if that rain forecast is correct. Okay, yappity yappity yap yap yap. Let's get on to the next piece. So this is what I call the south block. This is where the chicken tractor is. The lower part of this section, below the buckwheat, is where we had the pine wood chips, and it kind of screwed up the soil a bit in there. So I'm working the chicken tractor over that. And underneath that there is garlic that didn't do so well. We had a lot of weed pressures in there. I mowed this off, and we'll see the garlic may re-sprout over the winter, and I may be able to transplant that out in the spring and work it back up to a good seed size again. We'll see what happens with that. Main thing I'm focused on today is this block here. This was rye and buckwheat in alternating 5-foot strips in here. It's really hard to tell if any of the rye took. We definitely do have a lot of white clover in here still, and a lot of other native species. It's grown in pretty thick, which is good cover. But these sunflowers have been chewed on by the deer, as you can very plainly see. They're not really going to do much, so rather than try to hang on for a few sunflowers, I'm going to come back in here and either mow this or probably roll it and then mow it, because that seems to be a nice easy way to do it. Roll it, mow it, and I'm just going to run through with the seeder and seed it. I'm not going to drill this in. I'm just going to seed over top of it, and we'll see what happens. It'll be another good no-till seeding experiment. I'm going to do rye with that as well. I've got about 13.7 pounds left. I'm going to use about 7 of that in this area. It's a 1,500 square foot, so that's pretty heavy seeding. And then up top, I've got another spot that I'm going to seed rye in. We'll go take a look at that. While we're out here looking at the cover crops, I guess I'll just show this. That frost wiped out all the buckwheat that was in here. We did get decent germination, I guess you could say, for low till, high grass pressure, very, very dry. A lot of conditions were working against this, but this is grown in nice and dark and green. I imagine a lot of that rye has established itself in here as well. Again, that's hard to tell with all the other grasses in here. Only time will really show that out. But I just thought I'd get a shot of this. It definitely is nice and green. It's covered with growing plants, so that's good. We're building soil carbon matter, and we'll see how the rye does. It'll be a good experiment, especially for an area that hasn't been worked in a couple of years. Can we take it back just by seeding cover crops on it? Alright, on to the next block. Okay, so here we are at the upper section. When I seeded this with rye, I went really close to this holy basil and basically flung some rye seed in off the seeder into there. So we're probably halfway in there, or maybe half of this row width in, seeded with rye, so that'll come up underneath as the frost wipes these things out. Up here there isn't anything seeded in here yet for cover crops, but I'm going to take that other 6 pounds of rye. I'm going to go through, I'm going to seed the upper edge of this and the bottom edge of the tomatoes and the upper edge, and in here, believe it or not, under all these weeds there are some really nice potatoes, and there's some onions, although the onions are very small because of the drought and my inability to provide good, constant, continuous moisture to them. But I have been picking them off and cooking with them, and I've really enjoyed that. And I guess I'll just show you. Well, here's the potato plants. You can see those are just starting to yellow back now, so I guess I can probably come through and harvest this soon. And let's see. Yeah, there's some onions there underneath. And there's nicer ones if you go up the row further here. Let's take you up here quick, where the light is in here a little more. There you go. You know, they're not huge onions, but they're almost like a shallot or a scallion or something like that, fairly small. And of course you can see some of these Kennebec potato plants are still just dark green and cranking, so that's part of why I've just let this go. I should have come through here and weeded, but you know, there's always 10 million things to do. Which of the first million that you can do in a day are you going to do? Anyway, I'm going to go through and seed this heavily with rye. Hopefully we'll take back some of this smartweed and stuff. This area has been worked in high nutrition. This particular strip up here, as well as the tomato strip, I think 2 years in a row I worked that with Sea Shield Rejuvenate, Spectrum Extra, BioCoat Gold, and Biogenesis in the fall. And was it 2 years ago, I think, I came through here, and it was amazing. I was actually able to pull out yellow dock. That's these guys are super stubborn, super deep root. Early spring I was able to come through and actually pull those out by the root by hand without any digging. So the soil has softened here tremendously. This is a very tight clay soil when I started. So that's really encouraging and exciting, and I'm going to keep working it. So anyway, so that's what's going on here. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Alright, one pass through with the roller to knock it down. Now I'm going to go through with the mower and chop it, and then we'll seed it. Alright, a couple of passes with the mower. Mostly could beat it down about that flat one pass, but there was some stubble, and I just like to get it chopped up nice. We got a ton of nice organic matter sitting on top now. We'll go through and seed rye into that. That should germinate up through, and that organic material should help supply nutrition and biology and you know, a medium for biology to work on until it establishes with the plants in the soil. Assuming, of course, all the other inoculants I've put down over the years are already taken hold. Anyway, this grew in really nice and thick. I was surprised how much soil moisture was in here. It's been really dry all season. We have not had a lot of rain, but under here where it's been covered in growing plants and soil, and it's had a few inoculants and foliar feeds, the soil is nice and moist, even just with that little bit of rain we had last night, and I suspect it was probably moist even before that. So that's nice. Anyway, I'll come back with a seeder and seed it, and then this will be done. I'm not going to drill this in with the tiller. We're just going to seed into the mulch here, and I expect it will establish okay. But we'll see. It'll be another good experiment. Alright, that's it. It's seeded. You can see the seed sitting on top here. And that's it. Now we let it do its thing. Let the rain drill it in. Let it germinate. Come back and inoculate and drench with some nutritional supplements. After the rains, I'll do a video on that when I do it, and I'll talk about what I'm using, why I'm using it, how I'm using it, and what effects it has. I think that's basically it for now. I seeded that upper block also. Yeah, time to feed the chickens. Chickens are anxious for their nutritional supplement. Aren't you, chickens? Are you chickens anxious? Are you anxious? Are you anxious, birds? I would spread the chicken feed, the supplemental feed, out in the cage, and like they've been on this for 2 days now, so it's kind of chewed down, but if I see a spot where it's kind of matted down and they haven't really scratched down into it, I'll tend to put the feed there to get them to come in and scratch it and break it up a little better. The other reason I split the feed up is because we have the pecking order here, and we got a couple of bullies in this flock. And so if I spread it out, then everybody can get to feed without anybody else denying access to feed, because that's something that they like to do. Remind you of any of our political leaders? So I seeded the lower area, seeded the upper area. This area, I have to say that broadcast seeder is really handy. It's set up so that one side it basically forms a line, and the other side it broadcasts off to. So I'm able to go down, I was able to go down this row, hug the right hand edge, seed off in under the tomatoes, flip around, come back down the other edge, seed off in under the basil, and fill that space in between the holy basil and the regular basil where I seeded from the other side. So this should be pretty well covered in here with seed, right up to the fence, up to the tomatoes. And again, I was able to use that same tactic down this side. I just went through and gave this a shave mow so I wouldn't have any tangling on the spinner or interference. And then came through, same thing, just hug one side, shoot it in, hug the other side, shoot it in, and I went back around the top here, same thing. And you can see where I kind of hugged it real close here coming down that last pass. So this whole thing should be seeded to rye now. I put about 6 pounds down on here, and this is around 1,500 square feet, so should be pretty decent coverage. And that should come in and fill in over the winter and keep building the soil structure and soil health. And in the spring I'll either mow that down or roll it down or something, and try to use it to form an initial mulch mat to establish tomatoes in next year, or whatever crop goes in here. Probably tomatoes, because I've been working the soil toward better tomato nutrition. As an awesome side note, I'm finally starting to see some ripening crimson beefsteaks. I'm really excited for a crimson beefsteak sandwich toasted with cheddar cheese and some rosemary and some fresh basil, and maybe a little bit of olive oil or something. Oh man, that's going to be so good. So even despite the frost, still going to pull off some tomato harvest out of it. Alright, that's it. I think that's everything I wanted to cover. Come over and check out Comrades in Farms here on the YouTube channel or on Truth Frequency Radio. Tuesday nights 9 p.m. Pacific, Wednesday morning 12 a.m. Eastern. It's 2 hours and we talk about farming and ecology and a whole bunch of subtle details. As time goes on, I'll be having all sorts of awesome guests. Already had some really cool guests tentatively agree to come on. Ian Stepler from a Canadian Beekeeper's blog, and Kaylee from the Honeystead, and Justin Goodearth from Justin Goodearth YouTube channel, and I'm sure there will be other awesome guests as well. So don't forget to tune into that or check it out later if you miss it live. Okay, I'm done babbling. Thanks for watching the Farmacy Seeds Network.